The jungle erupts in gunfire. Leaves shred midair like confetti at a funeral, and Lieutenant Travis Reardon screams into his radio, sweat pouring down his temple as the sound of RPGs howl through the tree canopy. We're pinned down. I need air support now, but the only answer is static, thick and dead, as the body of the radio operator sprawled nearby, chest torn open by shrapnel. And that's when Corporal Elijah Brooks, 31 tall, built like a linebacker, but quick and agile as a mountain cat, dark-skinned and calm-eyed, steps through the chaos like he belongs in it. His hands bloodied but steady, a red cross patch on his arm, catching the sun between blasts, dragging the limp body of Private Henson toward a half-buried root trench while bullets whiz past. "He's gonna bleed out in 60 seconds, Elijah says in a deep, unshaken voice, unless I cut and clamp now. But Reardon, crouched beside a fallen log, shouts back, "He's not worth it?" That's an order, and Elijah doesn't even look at him, because war doesn't care about orders when life hangs by a thread, and you're the only thing standing between breath and silence. And with a flick of his knife, he's already sliced through muscle and found the artery working fast, jaw clenched, while Reardon glares at him like he's disobeying God himself. And beneath that glare is something colder contempt. Not just for the disobedience, but for the man delivering it, for the skin he's in, for the poise he shows under pressure that Reardon can't replicate even with rank on his collar and medals on his chest. And hours later, back at base, the lieutenant storms into the med tent where Elijah is sterilizing tools, barking loud enough for the whole unit to hear. "You don't give the orders out there. Brooks, you're just a goddamn medic." And when Elijah wipes his hands, slowly meeting his superior's eyes with that same composed, silent gaze, Reardon sneers. "You think being some field nurse makes you special. I've seen your type, always playing the hero for attention, hoping someone forgets where you came from, and the words hang thick, dipped in something rotten, and every man in the tent feels it, but says nothing, because the uniform doesn't protect you from bigotry. If your skin doesn't match the command photo," and Elijah just nods. Once slow, like he's seen this before, swallowed it before, back when he was 12, and his father's store was vandalized for having the wrong kind of owner, back when he was 17, and told he was too street smart to get into med school, and again when he earned his field medic certification top of his class, and someone muttered, "Must have had a diversity boost," and he's long since learned to bleed without letting it show, to bury insult beneath precision and purpose. But that night he sits alone by the campfire, looking out at the dark jungle, remembering his mother's voice. "You don't answer ignorance with rage, baby. You answer it with excellence. Make them choke on their assumptions." And the next morning he's back at it, mending wounds, checking vitals, writing reports with perfect penmanship, while Reardon parades around barking orders and preening like war's chosen son. Until 3 days later, everything changes, because during a recon sweep near the river bend, Reardon steps on a pressure plate mine, and there's a thunderclap of fire and dust and screaming. And when it clears, the lieutenant is crumpled like a broken toy, lower leg blown halfway off, blood soaking through his fatigues. Eyes wide with a panic. No drill ever taught him how to master, and everyone freezes except Elijah, who's already running, sliding down the muddy embankment, yelling, "Hold him. Keep him from thrashing," as he drops beside the lieutenant tourniquet, wrapping tight like a python. Morphine jabbed into muscle with the clean grace of a man who's done it 100 times before. And Reardon sobs hands, gripping at nothing. And Elijah works without flinching, even when shrapnel slices his own forearm, even when the lieutenant cries, "I don't want to die. Oh, God, I don't want to die." And Elijah murmurs low like a lullaby wrapped in iron, "You're not gonna die, sir. I got you." And when the medevac lands, it's Elijah who carries him to the chopper, who stays beside him. The whole ride bloodied and silent. And Reardon, drifting in and out of morphine fog, looks up and sees the man he dismissed. The man he humiliated, holding his life together with bare hands and bandages, and something inside him breaks not from pain, but shame. And back at the base hospital, Reardon wakes to find a nurse adjusting his IV. And the first thing he asks is, "Where's Brooks?" And when they tell him Elijah's still in the field, he asks for a pen and writes a letter not just to command, but to the Department of Defense recommending a citation for Valor, detailing how one medic's refusal to abandon a man saved not only a life, but a soul. And 2 weeks later, when Elijah returns, tired and limping from a sprained ankle, Reardon wheels himself out to meet him, eyes sunken but clear, and in front of the whole unit. He says, voice raw but steady, "I was wrong about you, Corporal. You didn't just save my life. You showed me what a real soldier looks like." And Elijah doesn't smile, just nods once and walks past him because he didn't do it for thanks or redemption. He did it because human life matters, no matter the rank or the past or the prejudice. And that moment captured by a field photographer goes viral when shared by the Defense Department, and soon the story spreads the combat medic who saved the man who belittled him, the black soldier who proved that dignity needs no permission, and at a Pentagon press event 6 months later, when Elijah stands at the podium in full dress uniform, bronze star pinned to his chest, the room goes quiet as he speaks into the microphone. Deep voice, steady and resonant. "I didn't choose to serve because I was angry. I chose to serve because I believed this uniform should mean the same thing for everyone. Not just those born with privilege, but all of us who earn it. We fight the enemy outside, but sometimes we need to fight the one within." And the crowd rises, some teary-eyed, some stunned, as the message sinks deeper than any wound that courage isn't color-coded and justice isn't a favor. It's a right, and in that moment even those who once doubted him can't help but feel smaller beside the towering presence of a man who answered hate with humanity, a man who taught them all. Sometimes the strongest hands come not with rank, but with resolve, and the deepest valor is silent until it saves you. Months pass. The world moves on, headlines fade, but the legend of Corporal Elijah Brooks begins to settle into something more permanent. Not just a viral post, not just a Bronze Star story, but into the marrow of people who saw more than just a soldier in uniform. Back at Fort Lancer, Elijah returns to the same routine: sutures, drills, field, trauma simulations. But now, young recruits walk a little straighter when he enters the room, not because he demands it, because he doesn't, because his silence carries more weight than most people's shouting ever could. He's offered interviews, podcasts, even a book deal, but he turns them all down with the same quiet shake of the head. "I'm not here for applause," he says to the base chaplain one evening as they sip coffee near the barracks. The night cool. "And still, I just want the next one like me to walk in and not have to prove they belong." But change, Elijah knows, is slow. One story won't erase a culture built on invisible lines, race, class, privilege, power, but it can crack the surface. And that crack is starting to spread when Lieutenant Reardon returns to active duty on a desk assignment leg, replaced by a sleek carbon fiber prosthetic. He does something no one expects. He requests Elijah by name to help lead the base's new Joint Leadership Ethics training. I want them to hear from someone who knows the cost of silence. Reardon says during his first session standing on stage beside Elijah. Voice steadier, now stripped of arrogance, human for the first time. Some soldiers shift uncomfortably. Others lean forward. Reardon doesn't sugarcoat it. I thought I was better because of where I came from. Because of the color of my skin, because I had a silver spoon, and he had grit. But when that bomb went off, none of that mattered. My blood was red and his hands were steady, and Elijah, standing next to him, finally speaks not in anger, but with conviction. This uniform doesn't make you just. Your actions do. And if you can't see the value in the person next to you, no matter what they look like, you're not ready to lead. The program spreads bases across the country begin to adopt it. At the Pentagon, a quiet directive is issued encouraging broader diversity in leadership pipelines. At Fort Lancer, Elijah is promoted to Staff Sergeant still. He stays grounded. He visits the wounded every morning before sunrise. He still walks the rows of the infirmary with a clipboard and gentle words. One night, a young black recruit stops him outside the med bay. "Sir," the boy says, barely 20 eyes burning with unspoken shame. "They called me Charity, said I was just here to fill a quota." Elijah doesn't blink, he just steps closer, places a firm hand on the boy's shoulder, and says, "Let your excellence answer them. Make them regret opening their mouths." Weeks later, Elijah receives an official letter. He's been nominated for the Distinguished Service Cross. He folds it, sets it on the shelf. He doesn't chase medals, but he knows what it means. That someone out there is watching. That maybe, just maybe, the system is learning. He thinks of his father now gone who taught him how to fix broken shelves with bare hands. His mother who taught him how to mend broken spirits with soft words. He thinks of the kids back in his old neighborhood. Kids who think war is the only way out. And he writes to them quietly every Sunday. Sends books. Sends stories. Sends hope. And one day, during a base ceremony, a little boy runs up to him no older than 10, dark-skinned, bright-eyed, saluting with more pride than precision. "My big brother says you saved the army." He blurts. Elijah laughs. "Your brother's exaggerating," he says, kneeling to eye level. "But I'm trying to save something." Dignity. Maybe that's even more important. That night, under a sky full of stars, Elijah sits alone on the porch of the med bay. The war still rages somewhere, but here in this moment there's peace. Because even if the battle is far from over, the tide is turning. And the medic, once dismissed, once mocked, once nearly broken, has become the measure by which others are judged. Not because he shouted, but because he stood tall and proved without question that valor has no rank, that worth has no color, and that justice, when it finally comes, walks in on steady feet and carries a medic's bag. Would you like this story formatted for narration or adapted into a script for video? The seasons shift again. Winter frost begins to creep across the training fields at Fort Lancer. The air is sharp, the trees skeletal, and the world feels quieter, like it's holding its breath. Elijah Brooks, now 32, wears his stripes with the same humility he carried in the field. But the weight on his shoulders isn't lighter. It's heavier because now the eyes watching aren't doubting. they're expecting. And sometimes that burden is worse. He moves through the base like a calm current, never fast, never flashy, but always where he's needed. A hand to lift a fallen private. A voice of reason in hot tempers. A shadow in the emergency room, coaxing men back from the brink. But there are days, long, quiet days, when the old wounds ache. Wounds no one sees. Like the moment he was told years ago, "You don't look like a doctor." Or when a general once mistook him for janitorial staff and tossed him keys. Or when his childhood best friend joined the force back home and was shot during a routine stop because his badge wasn't believed. These ghosts don't scream. They whisper. But Elijah listens. One day, a civilian arrives on Base A, tall woman with silver braids and a press badge pinned to her jacket. Nadine Whitaker, journalist, war correspondent, once embedded with units in Fallujah, now doing a series called Faces of Service. She's heard the story of the medic who saved a lieutenant and changed a culture. She wants to write it, wants to film it. America needs to see this, she tells him in her soft, insistent voice. Elijah sighs. America only sees what it wants. He says, they'll scroll past it before it reaches their heart. But Nadine doesn't relent. She spends 3 days on base, filming, following him during drills in the infirmary, even while he kneels beside a trainee who's just passed out from exhaustion. She catches the way he presses his forehead to the boy's whispering. You're stronger than you think. Don't quit on yourself. She catches the way Reardon walks beside him now, not as superior, but as student. She catches the way the younger soldiers speak his name with reverence. Not fear, respect. The video goes live a week later. It's called The Hands That Heal a Soldier Named Brooks. It spreads faster than Elijah expects, not because it's dramatic, but because it's honest. People write letters. Parents of dead sons say they wish their boys had someone like him in their unit. Kids in underserved schools say they want to be medics now. But not just that, they want to be him. Calm, kind, unshakable. And then one day, a call comes from Washington, a quiet voice from a congressional office. They want Elijah to testify. Not about war, about dignity, about what it means to serve while black, about the invisible war beneath the camouflage. And so he goes, standing tall in a blue uniform, shoes polished to a mirror shine. The Capitol looms, marble cameras, senators with pens poised like knives. Elijah speaks steady, unflinching, not angry, but resolute. Combat isn't the only battlefield. For some of us, the first war begins the day we put this uniform on and are told we don't belong in it. There is silence afterward, the kind that means listening, not discomfort. And in that silence, something shifts. A new policy rolls out mandatory bias training across branches. A pilot mentorship program begins. And though the system still creaks like rusted metal, it's moving slowly. But moving, Elijah returns to Fort Lancer with no ceremony. No parade. Just a quiet handshake from Reardon, and a nod from the new base commander. A Latina woman who once served as a trauma nurse in Syria. She says to him, "Your shadow walks ahead of you now." Sergeant, and Elijah, ever steady, replies, "Let it guide someone else through the dark." Back in his quarters, he opens his footlocker. Inside are a few medals, a journal, and one photo faded, creased at the edges. His mother standing in front of their little store, arms folded chin high. He presses a finger to her smile. "You were right, Ma," he whispers. Excellence speaks louder than hate. And as the lights of Fort Lancer flicker across the tarmac, Elijah steps back into the night because His story isn't finished. His story is just one thread in a long, tangled cloth still being woven. And somewhere out there, a new recruit is walking through the gates. Skin, dark eyes, uncertain heart full of dreams. And Elijah will be waiting not as a hero, but as proof. Proof that dignity can wear boots, that truth can bleed, that the healer, when dismissed, may yet become the force that saves everyone. Spring rolls in like a quiet drumbeat. Soft rains washing over Fort Lancer green, returning to the trees, and with it the promise of change. But change, Elijah Brooks knows, is not always gentle. One morning, during a training exercise in the hills outside base, word crackles over the comms. An explosion, one Humvee, overturned, two missing. Elijah is already moving before the sentence finishes. Grabbing his trauma bag, sprinting up gravel paths slick with dew. When he reaches the wreck, smoke is curling into the sky. The scent of gasoline sharp and violent. And beside the vehicle, a young corporal named Sanchez is crumpled beneath twisted steel eyes, fluttering chest, barely moving. Pulse is weak. Elijah says to the shaken sergeant beside him, "I need everyone back." Now he works fast, too fast, and yet somehow time slows. Metal groans under pressure as he wedges himself into the wreckage. One hand holding Sanchez's jaw, steady the other clamping the arterial bleed. Rain begins to fall. Not hard, just enough to mix with blood. He doesn't flinch. An hour later, back at the infirmary, Sanchez is stabilized alive. The surgeon pulls Elijah aside. "The boy would have died in under 4 minutes. You gave us 20. How the hell did you do that?" Elijah doesn't answer. He just looks out the window. His jaw tight, shoulders wet with someone else's blood. That night, as the base quiets and the world spins indifferently on, he sits outside again, alone, sipping cold coffee. A letter rests beside him, a real one, handwritten, sent by a mother in Georgia whose son watched Elijah's Pentagon testimony in his high school civics class. He cried afterward, she wrote. He said, "Mom, he looks like me. If he made it, maybe I can too." Elijah closes his eyes. That boy, that hope, that possibility. It's why he keeps moving forward, not for medals, not for articles, for them, for every black child told they're too loud, too quiet, too angry, too soft, for every medic dismissed as just a Band-Aid boy, for every man who was ever told he didn't belong in the photo because he wasn't the right look. He remembers being that boy. Sitting alone at 17, reading anatomy books by candlelight because the lights had been cut off. He remembers the cold sting of rejection letters. The way the word urban followed him like a scar in his college interviews. And he remembers how he got here one foot in front of the other. One life saved at a time. A few weeks later, a general from the Pentagon arrives unannounced. He finds Elijah in the infirmary, tending to a private's dislocated shoulder. Sergeant Brooks. He says stiffly, "There's been a directive from the Joint Chiefs. We're forming a National Combat Medical Leadership Task Force. We want you to chair it." Elijah blinks, surprised for the first time in a long while, sir. He begins, but the general raises a hand. "You're not here just to save lives anymore. Brooks, you're here to shape the people who will." The words sink in slowly. He thinks of the responsibility, the scrutiny, the weight of it. And then he says quietly, "Then we need to start with the truth. No more pretending race doesn't affect who gets listened to. No more pretending dignity is optional." And the general stoic old school, hardened by wars, nods. That's why we need you. So Elijah goes to Washington again. This time, not to speak, but to build, to rewrite training manuals, to challenge hiring practices, to lead trauma simulation labs that now include psychological equity modules. And at the heart of it all is a simple plaque above the door of his new office at Fort Belvoir. We save with skill, we lead with grace. 2 years pass. Fort Lancer has changed. More diverse faces in leadership, more mentorships, more recruits from places they used to overlook. And one day, back at the base for an anniversary visit, Elijah walks through the infirmary and stops short. There's a young woman there. Hair in braids, hands moving fast over a bleeding simulation dummy, a patch on her shoulder. Trainee medic, Sergeant Cadet, Olivia Brooks, his niece. She looks up, eyes fierce. "Uncle Elijah," she says with a grin, "you gonna critique my field dressings, or just stand there proud and speechless?" Elijah laughs, full and free, and says, "Both." He watches her work, steady, precise. And something inside him softens. Later that evening, standing by the same campfire he's returned to for years, Elijah looks up at the stars and exhales slowly. The war is never really over. Not for men like him, but the fight has changed. The silence is being broken. The next generation is rising, not with fear, but with fire. And maybe, just maybe, dignity no longer has to be earned in blood. Maybe it can be something they start with, something finally written into the code. As the flame flickers, casting long shadows behind him, Elijah Brooks, soldier, healer, brother, mentor, knows this much. He didn't just survive the war, he changed it. Summer brings a thick, humming heat to Fort Belvoir, where the sun sticks to uniforms and the air smells of pine and metal. Staff Sergeant Elijah Brooks stands at the edge of the new Combat Medical Leadership Facility. His facility now watching a class of cadets work a complex mass casualty drill under the blazing sun. He watches, not with detachment, but with careful eyes because he remembers being in their boots. Sleeves, rolled lungs burning, always having to be better just to be seen as equal. The building behind him bears his name now. The Elijah Brooks Center for Tactical Medical Ethics and Response. But he doesn't pause to admire it. Legacy to him isn't brick and title. It's the breath still in a soldier's lungs because someone didn't hesitate to save them. He walks through the simulation floor, where holographic trauma scenarios loop in, rotating drills. IED blasts, field, amputations, gas inhalation. Every soldier in the room, from green recruits to seasoned medics, stands a little taller when he enters. They don't salute anymore. Not just out of protocol, but respect. Because Elijah doesn't command with noise, he leads by presence. At the far end of the lab, a nervous cadet fumbles a chest decompression needle. His hands trembling. Elijah kneels beside him, gently guiding his wrist. Slow is smooth. He says, smooth is fast. You got this. The cadet exhales, resets, succeeds. Thanks, sir, he says, voice cracking. Elijah nods once. Don't thank me. Thank yourself for not giving up. But as his influence spreads, so does resistance. Not everyone wants the system to change. Whispers grow behind polished conference doors, grumblings from high-ranking officers who think the focus on ethics and equity is making soldiers soft. At a closed military board meeting, one general scoffs. We don't need philosophy in the field. We need killers and cleaners. Elijah's name is dropped with a smirk. Great PR. But is he really combat material? The insult reaches him days later, passed like poison through someone trying to be helpful. Elijah listens, nods, and responds. Let's put that theory to the test. 2 weeks later, he leads a surprise readiness drill in a thunderstorm, dragging real soldiers through simulated hell. No power night vision, only mass triage with half the team playing wounded. Elijah works shoulder to shoulder with them. Wet, exhausted, kneeling in mud to perform a simulated field C-section on a casualty model. The general who doubted him watches from afar silent, as Elijah gives orders with the calm of a hurricane's eye and gets every soldier out of the hot zone within the golden hour. At debrief, Elijah stands soaked in rain, looks at the brass officers and says, "This isn't about softness. It's about readiness with empathy. If you can't care for the soldier bleeding next to you, you don't belong in uniform." The room is silent. No more jokes, no more smirks. That same week, Elijah is invited to speak at West Point cadets fill the auditorium rows upon rows of sharp minds and sharper expectations. He steps to the podium not in dress blues, but in his field medic fatigues. The sleeves rolled the patch still worn from years of wear. Leadership. He says, his voice slow and deliberate, isn't proven when you give an order. It's proven when someone's dying, and you kneel down in the mud to save them. Your uniform doesn't make you noble. Your choices do. The ovation afterward is thunderous, but he doesn't linger for handshakes or interviews. He leaves through the side exit and drives straight to a small hospital in D.C., where a community program he funds in secret is offering free trauma care workshops to underserved high schoolers. There he kneels beside a teen learning CPR on a dummy, a skinny boy with cracked glasses and fingers that shake. Elijah steadies his hands. "There you go," he murmurs. "You just saved someone's life." The boy looks up, eyes wide. "You're the guy from YouTube, and the Senate speech, and that Army commercial." Elijah chuckles. "Nah, I'm just the guy who didn't quit. You can be that too." The boy's hands stop trembling. That night, Elijah returns to his apartment, small and spare walls lined with old field notebooks, photos of recruits he's trained, thank you letters folded into corners. On the top shelf is a single box, inside his Bronze Star, the Distinguished Service Cross, and a sealed envelope addressed to the future medic who thinks they're not enough. It contains one sentence: "You already are. Just don't let them tell you otherwise." As the night deepens, he steps onto the balcony below, the lights of the base pulse steadily. Beyond them, the nation churns loud divided, struggling to define what it values. But here, in this quiet pocket of clarity, Elijah Brooks stands unshaken. The soldier, who was dismissed, now defines the very standards by which others are measured. Not because he fought louder, but because he fought smarter, kinder, with hands that heal and a spine that never bent. And tomorrow, when another child walks through those military gates, unsure if they belong, they'll see his name, his shadow, his legacy, and they'll know they do. Autumn settles over the capital like a soft warning, leaves turning air crisp with change, and yet beneath the golden trees of Arlington and the clean marble faces of Washington's monuments, something heavier stirs. Across the country, a series of investigations are quietly launched into misconduct and bias within elite military units. Whistleblowers, officers, medics, intelligence techs begin to speak. Patterns emerge. Names surface. And somewhere deep in the Pentagon, Elijah Brooks' name comes up again. Not as a suspect, but as a standard. They call him into a classified hearing. No cameras, no microphones, just generals in rows, civilian advisors with clipped speech, and the Secretary of Defense herself sitting at the far end of the room, her fingers folded under her chin. "We need to rebuild from within," she says. "Not just new training manuals, new blood, new truth. You've done more to change this culture through example than 1,000 PowerPoints. We're forming a council. It will oversee equity and command structure, recruitment, field response, and conflict de-escalation. You'll lead it." Elijah doesn't answer right away. His eyes scan the room he sees, tired faces, sharp suits, rows of stars pinned to collars, and, for a second, he feels the weight of every fight every moment. He was mocked every time he bit his tongue until it bled. Only if it's not just performative. He finally says, "Only if you let me bring voices that were never allowed in this room." The secretary nods once. "Bring them." And he does. Within months, the council becomes the most controversial body in modern military history. Veterans once sidelined for speaking truth are brought to the table. Women who were punished for reporting harassment, soldiers of color who were passed over for promotion despite spotless records, medics who were ordered to look the other way. Elijah walks the line between reform and rebellion, threading every meeting with facts, empathy, and resolve. He's not loud. He doesn't have to be. His presence commands the air. And while some in power resist, fearing the erosion of tradition, the momentum is irreversible. A retired general, known for his disdain of woke culture, accuses Elijah in a leaked memo of replacing discipline with political correctness. The story explodes across media outlets. Interviews are demanded, think pieces pour in. The pressure mounts, but Elijah doesn't flinch. He holds a single press conference. No podium, no flags, just him standing on the steps of the Capitol with his sleeves rolled up, speaking into the October wind. Justice is not weakness. Accountability is not politics. And if your traditions depend on silence, maybe they were broken to begin with. The speech goes viral. Cadets across the nation replay it during morning runs. A group of high school students from Detroit create a scholarship in his name. A mural of him appears on the side of a building in Atlanta, painted mid-action, cradling a wounded soldier in one arm, holding a medical bag in the other. His face calm, his eyes burning with purpose. People begin to call him the quiet reform, but inside, Elijah remains the same man. He still walks the wards at night, still writes handwritten notes to recruits who failed their exams, still visits the grave of Lieutenant Reardon once a year, who passed quietly from infection complications. His final letter to Elijah unread by the world, but burned forever in his mind. "You saved me more than once. Thank you for making me a better man." And then, one evening, under a gray sky heavy with coming snow, Elijah receives a private invitation to the White House. No briefing, no agenda. Just a quiet ceremony inside the East Room in front of only 24 people. The President of the United States pins a Medal of Honor to Elijah Brooks's uniform, not just for valor in combat, but for moral courage in the face of institutional resistance. This man, the President says, taught us that healing and leadership are not opposites. They are the same thing. Elijah accepts the medal, but afterward, as always, he vanishes before the reporters can crowd him. He returns to Fort Belvoir by nightfall, finds the youngest class of medics still scrubbing down the sim bay, and rolls up his sleeves beside them. A recruit drops her sponge in surprise. "Sir, you, You're back already." Elijah smiles, kneeling to clean a blood-slick training floor. "Told you I'd be back before curfew." And that night, when the lights are off and the halls echo only with distant footsteps, Elijah enters the room where it all began, a small glass case where his first medic patch still hangs beside a photo of his old squad. He stares at it for a long time. Not with pride, with peace. Outside, the wind howls. But inside, it's still, because change, real change, doesn't shout, it endures. And the boy who was once dismissed, quiet, dark-skinned, underestimated, is now the voice through which a nation listens. Winter strikes with brutal precision. The wind at Fort Belvoir carves through even the thickest uniforms. The ground is crusted with ice, and soldiers breathe fog into the freezing dawn. But Elijah Brooks is already awake before reveille, lacing his boots, calloused fingers steady despite the cold. He's been promoted again, Master Sergeant now, and yet he still refuses the private office they offered. "I don't lead from behind glass," he'd told the brass. His desk remains among the field medics near the triage beds, where it smells of antiseptic sweat and the lingering echo of pain. On the surface, he is a decorated legend. His name is taught in leadership courses. Quotes from his speeches are stenciled on academy walls. But beyond the admiration, behind the applause, another storm brews, quieter, deeper. Anonymous threats begin to arrive, emails laced with venom, letters accusing him of weakening the army. Some signed with fake names, others with the boldness of hate. "Go back to the ghetto you crawled out of," one reads. "You're not a warrior. You're a disgrace." He reads them all, never flinches, then locks them in a box marked Truth. Because this, too, is part of the mission. One morning, while conducting a field ethics workshop near Quantico, a young black cadet, Peterson, barely 19, pulls Elijah aside. "Sir." He stammers, voice cracking. "They keep calling me charity case behind my back. My CO said I only got in 'cause of politics." Elijah studies him. The boy, his thin eyes hollowed from lack of sleep, hands curled into fists. "I want to fight back," Peterson whispers. "I want to make them hurt." Elijah is quiet for a long moment. Then he places a hand on Peterson's shoulder. Pain makes noise. He says, "Excellence makes echoes. Be better, not for them, for you." Peterson breaks down in tears. Elijah just stands beside him, unmoving, absorbing the weight of another soul trying not to drown. That night, Elijah writes a speech. Not for cameras, not for the Pentagon, for the base chapel. The topic: the war we don't talk about. Soldiers of every rank file into the pews. Some expect politics, some expect stories. What they get is a sermon, not of religion, but of truth. There is a war that doesn't use bullets. It starts the moment a soldier of color walks into a room and isn't seen. When a woman speaks in command and gets ignored. When trauma goes untreated because strength is confused with silence. I've fought both wars, the one outside and the one inside this institution, and I'm still standing. So will you. But we don't win with fists. We win with presence. The room falls to stillness. Then thunderous applause. But again, Elijah walks away from it all, because his job isn't to be celebrated, it's to clear the path. And then, unexpectedly, an order comes. Classified mission Syria, civilian, med evac, under threat. And they want Elijah to lead the medical team. I'm not a field asset anymore, he tells command. You are now, they reply. Because the mission is unstable, the locals don't trust Americans, and the only way they'll agree to extraction is if he is the face of it. So he goes. The flight is quiet. the landing rough. The camp is chaos. Wounded children, mothers clinging to corpses, and in the center of it all, Elijah walks tall through the smoke. No rifle, only his trauma kit and open hands. The locals recognize him, not from military files, but from a smuggled broadcast of his capital speech translated into Arabic. One elder approaches and says, through a translator, "You are the one who speaks without hate." Elijah bows his head. "I'm the one who listens." They let the med team work. 73 civilians are evacuated over 4 days. No shots fired, no blood spilled, only healing. When Elijah returns to American soil, the nation watches in stunned reverence. The headlines don't read, "Master Sergeant Elijah Brooks returns home." They read, "Healed without a weapon," and this time, the ones who once doubted him are silent, because there's nothing left to say. A month later, at a private ceremony beneath the rotunda of the National Museum of African American History and Culture, Elijah is honored with a permanent exhibit, "The Medic Who Changed the Code." His boots are displayed under glass, his stained field bag, and next to them a wall of letters, all handwritten, all from soldiers, students, survivors. Words like, "You saved my son," "You made me stay in school," "You made me believe I belonged." Elijah doesn't attend the ceremony. He's in Louisiana, walking a storm-damaged neighborhood, helping medics deliver care to the forgotten poor. Someone asks him, "Why aren't you in Washington?" He simply says, "They already have my name, but these people still need my hands." That night, back at a borrowed cot in a flooded school gym, he opens his journal. On the last page, he writes, "Not finished yet. Spring returns once more." Soft rain tapping against the hospital glass at Fort Belvoir. New recruits marching in cadence across muddy fields, and Master Sergeant Elijah Brooks sitting quietly in the back of a pediatric cancer ward, reading aloud to a boy with a missing leg, and a laugh too big for the pain he carries. Elijah has just come back from another trip, this time to the inner cities of Chicago, where he helped set up trauma response workshops in high schools that had more bullet holes than books. He's thinner now, not from sickness but motion. His life is movement. His name is legacy. But the fire in him hasn't dimmed. It's only deepened. Across the country, the military's tone has changed. Quiet reforms have become loud. Commanders now open speeches quoting Elijah's Senate testimony. "Your uniform doesn't make you noble. Your choices do." His words are painted on barracks walls, printed on academy pamphlets. But even in all the reverence, Elijah remains outside it. He does not seek to be enshrined. He walks in shadows, where the overlooked still bleed, where the system still stumbles. And one morning, he's asked to speak at the Joint Forces graduation ceremony, the largest of its kind in 20 years. Broadcast worldwide. He says no at first, until he sees the list of graduates. One name catches his eye. Private First Class Malek Reardon. He stares at the name, blinks breath, hitches Reardon, the son. The boy left fatherless by the war. Elijah once fought alongside Lieutenant Reardon, the man who once dismissed him, then died calling him brother. Elijah doesn't hesitate. He boards a flight the next day. The stadium is massive. Tens of thousands in the stands. Cameras, drones, generals in rows, like stone statues. And then Elijah steps onto the stage. No teleprompter, no script, just silence. And him. I don't speak today as a decorated soldier. He begins, voice slow, rich, resonant. I speak as a witness to what happens when we see the soul beneath the skin, when we choose to lead not by fear but by compassion. I was once told I wasn't meant to be more than a medic, that I didn't belong where decisions were made. But I made a choice to save even those who spit on my worth. And in doing so, I didn't just save lives. I reclaimed mine. He scans the crowd, finds Malik Reardon in the third row. Their eyes lock. Elijah nods almost imperceptibly. The young man, same steel-blue eyes as his father, nods back, a tear streaking down his cheek. Later that night, as fireworks burst above the Capitol, Elijah walks the long marble corridor of the Lincoln Memorial alone, the monument glowing in quiet reverence. He stops beneath the towering figure of Lincoln, breathes in the history carved into stone. A tourist recognizes him. "You're Sergeant Brooks," the man says breathlessly. "You changed everything." Elijah offers a small smile. Not everything, just enough to make the next change possible. And then one final twist. A letter arrives, stamped with a gold seal. Not from the military, but from the United Nations. They've been watching, monitoring. They want him to lead a global task force on ethical humanitarian response across war zones, refugee camps, and fractured nations. It's the biggest ask of his life. Not just a job, a transformation. Elijah reads the letter in silence. Then he pulls a pen from his shirt pocket and signs. Not with flourish, with purpose. Master Sergeant Elijah Brooks is leaving the Army, but not the mission. His final day at Fort Belvoir is quiet. No parade. Just a line of medics, soldiers, janitors, generals, and cooks, everyone who ever stood in his shadow and found shelter there. He shakes every hand, offers every name a blessing, and when he steps through the gates one last time, the base falls into respectful silence, the kind reserved for legends. Months later, he's in the middle of a refugee corridor in Sudan, guiding a team through a cholera outbreak when a local nurse, skin dark as his, hands him a child and says, "The boy trusts no one." But he asked for the man from the video, the one who heals without shouting. Elijah cradles the child, offers him water. The boy looks into his eyes, then whispers, "Are you the man who makes pain leave?" Elijah weathered, but whole smiles faintly. "No," he says, "but I stay until it does, because that is who he is." The soldier who was once dismissed, now a healer to the world, not by accident, by choice. And then, one cold morning on the edge of nowhere, on the dusty outskirts of a collapsed Syrian border town, Elijah Brooks kneels in the dirt, pressing his bare hand over a wounded father's abdomen, holding back blood with nothing but cloth and prayer. Around him, smoke rises from the shattered remains of a clinic bombed in the night. Children wail. A mother claws at the rubble, screaming for a name that will never answer again. And amid it all, Elijah doesn't blink. He's not surprised anymore by what war does. He only fights back against what it tries to erase dignity. Word spreads across the zone. He's here. The man with the scar on his left wrist. The man who kneels when others shout. Journalists try to reach him. Military advisors try to pull him into strategy rooms, but Elijah refuses. He builds tents, cleans wounds, teaches a girl how to make a tourniquet with an old scarf. He doesn't wait for policy. He makes change with his hands. At night, by the dim flicker of an oil lamp, he writes in his worn journal. Pages filled with places, names, injuries, but more than that, stories. The 12-year-old who stopped a convoy by laying her body over a boy with a shattered spine. The old man who gave up his last antibiotic for a stranger's child. The translator who stayed behind to help dig out the dead. Elijah records them all, not for history, but because the world forgets the quiet heroes, and he won't let that happen. Not again. Then one day it happens. A convoy of armed militia storms the medical zone. Guns raised. Screams everywhere. A young American nurse is pulled from a tent. A gun pressed to her head. She cries for help. Everyone freezes, except Elijah. He walks straight into the line of fire. No body armor. No weapon. Just calm eyes, and a voice that could halt thunder. "Take me instead," he says. "She's not who you want." The militia leader hesitates. His soldiers shift. One of them recognizes Elijah from a black and white flyer passed around in refugee camps. "Is that the doctor who shamed the American generals?" he whispers. The leader narrows his eyes, then lowers the gun. "You're not like the others." "No," Elijah replies. "I'm not here to win wars. I'm here to stop them from killing what's left of our humanity." The leader leaves. No blood spilled. Not that day. And that moment, caught quietly by a hidden aid worker's phone, circles the globe in under 24 hours. It's grainy, shaky, but unmistakable. Elijah Brooks standing between war and mercy. Again, the world explodes. The UN Humanitarian Council calls an emergency vote. They nominate Elijah to chair an unprecedented global initiative, the International Medical Peace Force, a coalition of medics, conflict negotiators, and trauma specialists who can deploy anywhere within 24 hours to prevent humanitarian collapse. Something that's never been done. Something they say can't be done. But Elijah doesn't hesitate. We start tomorrow. Over the next year, the world watches him move like a whisper between catastrophes. Earthquakes in Chile, genocide, threats in the Congo, chemical leaks in Bangladesh. Wherever hope is flickering, he walks into the fire carrying it in both hands. He trains soldiers to listen, trains doctors to lead, trains rebels to lower their rifles long enough to hear their children breathe, and back home they finally build the school he once dreamed of. The Elijah Brooks Global Institute of Ethical Combat Medicine. Not in Washington, but in Detroit. On the same block where he once cleaned up his father's shop after vandals left the words, "You don't belong," scrawled across the front window. The words are still there, preserved in the wall of the entrance. Framed, not erased. Because Elijah always said, "We don't grow by forgetting. We grow by remembering better." And on the opening day, a sea of young medics. White, black, brown, Muslim, queer, scarred, limping, shining stand in the auditorium as a hologram of Elijah speaks live from Mozambique. "You are the future. Now I'm just the echo." His voice breaks halfway through, but he doesn't stop. Lead with hands open. Walk into rooms. No one else will be the person who chooses mercy, even when surrounded by madness. If I leave you anything, it's this. You belong. You always have. And when the world tells you otherwise, you don't shout. You stand taller. And somewhere far away in a camp lit by lanterns and dust, Elijah Brooks puts away the comms unit, takes a deep breath, and returns to the tent where a girl is struggling to breathe. He picks up his stethoscope and keeps saving the world, one breath at a time. And finally, years later, when the world has spun forward and the dust of 100 conflicts has begun to settle, there is a statue, not made of marble, not standing in a city square, but built from steel fragments and broken medical gear placed in the center of the very first neutral field zone of the International Medical Peace Force. The plaque reads, Elijah Brooks. He fought without hate. He healed without pause. But Elijah isn't there to see it, because in the last quiet chapter of his life, he has disappeared from the stage and returned to the places no one visits. The forgotten towns, the scorched valleys, the places not shown on news feeds. He lives simply, teaches quietly. And one day a child asks him, will they remember you? Elijah smiles older. Now, eyes soft with peace. They don't need to remember me. Just the light I tried to carry. That's enough. And then, like always, he kneels beside a new wound, a new story, a new beginning. Because true heroes don't wait for applause. They live their truth until the world finally listens. If this story moved you, if you believe in justice, in dignity, in the quiet power of compassion, then help us keep stories like Elijah's alive. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful emotional narratives that challenge prejudice and celebrate human strength. Like the video, turn on notifications. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps us create more stories that speak truth, inspire action, and remind us all, no one is invisible. No one is too small to change the world. Thank you for being part of this mission.